Number 10. The Abandoned Batmobile. Everyone knows about Batman's notorious vehicle, right? But why did he abandon it? The most shocking abandoned vehicle might just be none other than the Batmobile. That's right. Somebody, though probably not Batman himself, has abandoned the Batmobile, and it's in some seriously rough shape. It appears to be the Batmobile from the Tim Burton movie Batman Returns, but nobody knows what it could possibly be doing sitting in a random patch of overgrown forest, littered with leaves and in horrible condition. The car appears to be busted up, and it doesn't even have any wheels on it. There's literally no context to the photographs. Nobody has any idea who took the photo, where it came from, or what forest the Batmobile is trapped in. But one of the best guesses is that it could be an old vehicle that was once on display at one of the Six Flags amusement parks. This should be a national treasure, and instead, it's just a piece of garbage littered with leaves. Won't some philanthropic billionaire come along and repair it back to its former glory? And maybe they could even take it out on a few night rides and fight some crime while they're at it. The way it looks right now, this is super unfortunate for the poor Batmobile. Number 9. The Battle Jitney. The Herkimer Battle Jitney was the vehicle used in the movie Mystery Men, starring Ben Stiller. It's also one of the more mysterious movie vehicles out there. The last it was ever used officially was at Comic-Con in 1999. And since then, this incredible movie vehicle, which had been meant as a soundproof personnel carrier, heavily armored with a wraparound windshield, has been pretty much lost and abandoned. It was allegedly put up on eBay a few years ago by a company that sells prop cars, but it's hard to say exactly what's happened to it since. There have been some images floating around of the Battle Jitney sitting in old yards disused. The best guess is that it's being tossed around on the second-hand vehicle marketplace. What's the weirdest or oldest car you've ever driven? A 30-year-old pickup truck? A busted old Cadillac with a bullet hole in it? Or an off-road SUV with giant lifted tires and an air intake snorkel way up high in the air? Tell me about your coolest automobile adventures in the comments below. Then be sure to subscribe to Talltanic for more amazing videos just like this one. Number 8. The Narco Tank. This automobile, if you can even still call it that, is pretty cool. It looks like something straight out of a science fiction movie. It's known as a narco tank, and it's something that's used by the Mexican drug cartels as a makeshift battle tank. The idea is that you take a truck and outfit it with a battering ram, a gunner's nest, bulletproof windows and sides, and then you go around doing whatever it is that criminal gangs and the cartel people do. It definitely looks like it would have been right at home in Mad Max or the Terminator, and I can't blame you for wanting one. This particular narco tank was discovered by Mexican authorities in the state of Jalisco, apparently abandoned on the side of the road. According to the LA Times, it was seized after some deadly shootouts between local police and gunmen. The vehicle itself is a 2011 Ford F-Series Super Duty, but altered with armored plating and even a gun turret. The battering ram on the front of the car looks like an ordinary lifting jack welded to the bumper. While nobody condones what the vehicle is being used for, it's definitely an interesting design. Number 7. China's bike graveyards. Moving on to something a little less violent, take a look at the bike-sharing graveyards growing in China. I don't care what you say, bicycles are vehicles too. Just go to Holland and ask them about their millions of bicycles that people use to commute everywhere. In any case, bike sharing in the late 2000s became hugely popular in many Chinese cities because of the environmental and health benefits. However, there are now hundreds of thousands of abandoned bicycles that have been littered all across cities like Beijing and Shanghai. They've been left randomly on the pavement, in parks, in fields, and basically wherever people decide they don't want to use them anymore. The deal with bike sharing is that you download the app, pay a small fee, then find the nearest bike to you and use it until you're done. When you stop using the bike, the timer runs out and you stop paying. The issue here is that unless there's a proper bike parking situation, you can just leave the bike anywhere. The result, as you can see, is a ridiculous number of unused bicycles and wasted materials. It looks like they didn't quite think this one through, and now have even more waste to contend with as a result. Perhaps someone smart will come up with a way to reuse all of those bicycles and get them back in the hands of people who need them. Number 6. The McDonald's Barge. The McDonald's Barge is almost a hilarious joke. It's so ridiculous that it's hard to believe it's real. It was originally constructed for the Expo 86 in Vancouver, Canada, but since then it's been abandoned and floating around from place to place. While there's been a lot of talk about this abandoned and decaying barge over the last 30 years, The truth is that apparently one guy has owned it for quite some time. After the floating McDonald's restaurant went out of business following the end of the World Expo in 1986, and after it sat abandoned in False Creek for several years, apparently a man named Howard Meakin purchased it. He's now been waiting for nearly 30 years to find the right location to anchor the ship and turn it into a seafood restaurant. Just imagine spending years for the proper place to start your restaurant while you have a giant abandoned McDonald's barge sitting in the river near your house. It's crazy. As of March 2020, Howard was spending a lot of money on restorations with the hope of having it ready to go within the year. Unfortunately, the coronavirus pandemic happened the month after. The McDonald's barge is probably going to remain abandoned just a little while longer. Number 5. The Concrete Ship. Perhaps one of the weirdest abandoned vessels is the SS Palo Alto, also known as the Concrete Ship. It's actually a historic World War I oil tanker. It was built to bring fuel across the ocean to supply our armies in Europe as they fought across the trenches. However, the war ended before the boat ever saw service. What happens to military surplus items after the war they were built for is over? Well, in this case, the boat was sold to the Sea Cliff Amusement Company of Nevada and then towed in 1929 to what is now the Sea Cliff State Beach. For a while, it turned into a casino and dance hall, but after the Great Depression in the 1930s, it was promptly abandoned. Today, the concrete boat is docked as a cultural history exhibit. It's become part of the beach itself, sitting at the end of the pier. It's technically still abandoned, but those visiting Santa Cruz can stop by and take some pictures of it. If you want to actually climb aboard, though, you'd be taking a huge risk, not to mention trespassing. Who knows what mischievous people have been up to in this abandoned hideout right off the pier in California, though. Number 4. The Ecto-1. The Ecto-1 is the famous Cadillac hearse from the original Ghostbusters movie. There were actually 3 versions of the car. One of them was used to show the unmodified vehicle that Ray bought in the original movie. The second was the modified Ecto-1 in the 1984 movie. And the third version was the Ecto-1A in the 1989 sequel. As far as the legend goes, the original Ecto-1 died on the Brooklyn Bridge while filming the sequel. After 1984, the Ecto-1A was forgotten and abandoned. It was apparently due to be crushed just a few years ago. However, a Ghostbusters fan petition to save the car allegedly convinced the studio that they should keep the vehicle. They then decided to use it in the newest movie, Ghostbusters Afterlife. The long-abandoned Ecto-1A has now been completely remodeled and restored for filming the newest Ghostbusters movie, which was supposed to release in July of 2020, but obviously never did due to the coronavirus pandemic. This is one story of a movie vehicle that actually got some good use. Let's just hope the new Ghostbusters movie comes out before 2038. Number 3. The Tanks of Flamenco Beach. The tanks of Flamenco Beach are absolutely awesome. These tanks are now rusted and covered in graffiti, littering the beach of Culebra Island in Puerto Rico. It's a beautiful destination and something of a surprise to find such old war machines stationed there. But the story behind these abandoned tanks is pretty interesting. After Spain ceded Puerto Rico to the United States in 1901, Theodore Roosevelt gave the public land of Culebra Island to the Navy. Then in 1936, the land was used for bombing practice. There was never any formal base made on the island, but they did move incredible amounts of equipment there, including tanks that were used for missile tests. In 1969 alone, missiles were dropped on the island for at least 228 days while Navy pilots trained for the Vietnam War. Now, the tanks are still sitting there abandoned. They've been blown apart by testing, and they've never been moved. Naval occupation ended in 1975 with the Navy leaving Culebra, but they never took their tanks with them. Apparently, the tanks were too big and heavy to move, so they were just left abandoned to be eaten by the salty winds. It'll take a few more years, but eventually the metal will rust and crumble away. Number 2. The Station to Nowhere. In China, there's a metro station in the middle of nowhere. This is one of the weirdest abandoned vehicle facilities in the world. It looks like something from a post-apocalyptic future. The name of the station is Kaojiawan Station, and it's near the city of Chongqing. The reason for its apparent neglect and abandonment is absolutely insane. The idea was that in 2015, the subway would connect a rural suburb with the center of the city. However, there are currently no suburbs to be linked to the city. The station was crafted as a vision of the future. The government is hoping that there will eventually be buildings, roads, and shops in the area, so they built the station in advance. It's essentially like they built a gas station without a road, hoping that someone would build a road. For all intents and purposes, the station is abandoned. It's literally in the middle of nowhere. The station has 3 exits, but they're all overgrown by weeds and barely even visible. According to a station worker, almost no passengers get off at the station unless it's just to take some interesting photographs. And this isn't even the weirdest thing to come out of the mass transit system of the area. There's actually a train that stops on the 6th and 7th floor of a giant apartment building in the middle of the city. The subway was literally designed so it could drop people off inside the apartment building where they live. If that's not convenient, I don't know what is. Number 1. The Thebagger 258. You may have heard of the Thebagger 258. It's one of the biggest machines ever constructed by human hands. It's a giant mining contraption built by the Germans to be used, well, in mining operations. It's a giant bucket wheel excavator that was first used in East Germany back in 1964. The motorized excavator comes included with 10 blades and dozens of buckets designed to hold an outstanding amount of dirt. But even though this was at one time one of the largest machines on the planet, it was actually abandoned in 2002. The reason is going to blow your socks off. The reason this huge and insanely expensive mining machine was abandoned was that it had no more things to dig. That's right, the Thebagger 258 was basically a giant shovel with no more dirt left to scoop. Because the behemoth was so old at the time and the cost of dismantling it would have been enormous, it was easier to just abandon it. Since 2002, the Thebagger 258 has sat immobile in a field in Germany. Which of these vehicles would you love to restore and drive yourself? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for stopping by. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and come back soon for another great video.